Modern Los Angeles, bright lights, endless movement, and air filled with smog and the scent of hot coffee. A huge glass room on the 30th floor of one of the skyscrapers in the city center reflected the light of the evening lights. Inside the studio, an intense silence prevailed. The cameramen were adjusting the cameras, the sound engineers were checking the microphones, and the producers were nervously pacing back and forth, reviewing the script on their tablets. In the center of the stage stood two black chairs, positioned at a slight angle to each other. Behind them was a panoramic window with a view of the evening Los Angeles. The lighting was soft but bright enough for the faces of the interviewees to be clearly visible on camera. Sylvester Stallone entered first. Black suit, a slight smile, but in his eyes, a hidden cold gleam. His stride was confident, his movements precise. He stopped in front of the chair, ran a hand through his hair, and sat down without saying a word. A minute later, Arnold Schwarzenegger entered the studio. He was wearing a gray jacket over a black t-shirt. His strong posture and facial expression made it clear that he was serious. Arnold sat opposite Sylvester, crossed his arms over his chest, and silently stared at him. The host, a young man with barely noticeable graying temples, smiled at the camera. "Good evening, dear viewers. Tonight we have a special episode. Two legendary actors, symbols of the action era, Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, are with us in the studio. We will talk about their careers, their lives, and the rivalry that has lasted for decades." Sylvester smiled slightly, but his eyes remained cold. "Rivalry? I think that's an exaggeration," he said calmly. Arnold raised his eyebrows. "Oh, really? Then how do you explain the fact that you tried to take the role of the Terminator from me?" Sylvester leaned forward slowly. "It's called competition. If you can't handle the pressure, you don't belong in this game." Arnold clenched his jaw. "I handled the pressure long before you first stepped onto the set, Stallone." The host nervously scanned the studio. The cameramen exchanged glances. The sound engineer gestured quiet, but the tension in the room was already palpable. Sylvester tilted his head. "So you're still upset about Rambo?" "Rambo? No, what really bothered me was how you convinced the producers to take my contract for Predator." Arnold's voice turned cold. "The contract you didn't sign yourself," replied Stallone, looking straight into Arnold's eyes. The tension in the studio reached its peak. Arnold and Sylvester did not look away from each other. The host cleared his throat. "Maybe we should return to the topic of the interview?" Sylvester raised his hand without breaking eye contact with Arnold. "No. I want to hear what else he wants to say." Arnold stood up. "If you want to know the truth, I've wanted to say this to your face for a long time." Sylvester sat calmly, leaning back in his chair. "All right. I'm listening." Arnold took a deep breath and took a step forward. "You've always thought of me as your main enemy. But you didn't understand the main thing. Without me, you wouldn't have become who you are." Sylvester squinted. "And how should I understand that?" Arnold took another step forward. "We pushed each other to the limit. Every victory of yours made me work harder. Every success of mine made you do better. If either of us had stopped, we both would have lost." Sylvester looked at him closely. A shadow of doubt appeared in his eyes, but he quickly hid it behind a calm mask. "So, you're saying we fought to stay the best?" Arnold sat down opposite and crossed his arms over his chest. "Exactly." Sylvester nodded. "Maybe you're right." The host sighed in relief and smiled. "Looks like we've witnessed a historic moment." Sylvester slowly raised his gaze to Arnold. "But you'll still never be better than me." Arnold grunted. "We'll see about that." The host laughed, but behind the smiles of the actors, the tension still lingered. A few seconds later, the studio erupted in applause. The camera zoomed out, leaving the two old rivals in a stare that could either mean the beginning of a new war or the end of an old one. Sylvester and Arnold sat across from each other, each feeling the growing tension between them. The host tried to intervene to ease the strain, but this only added fuel to the fire. "Well, let's change the subject a bit," the host said, attempting to break the conflict. "What are your thoughts on modern cinema and the development of the industry?" Arnold leaned back in his chair, as if preparing for a new attack. "Cinema is changing, that's true, but I often notice how new movies compromise on quality. But the old films, they had soul. We didn't just play roles, we created legends." Sylvester couldn't let this go unanswered. "Legends? Yes, that was our era. But what do you say about those films where you just stood there looking like a working robot? You relied more on muscles than acting skills back then." Arnold laughed, but there was a fury in his eyes. "Oh, you want to say you couldn't do the same? You've always been just the guy with attention, Sylvester. Sorry, but times change, and I don't see why you hold on to the past so much." The host nervously glanced between the two, but they were already deep in their emotions. The atmosphere in the studio was becoming increasingly tense. The two legends locked eyes, each trying to land the perfect blow. "You say I cling to the past," Sylvester responded, raising his voice, "but it's you trying to take everything for yourself. You don't understand that without us, without what we did, there would be no modern cinema." "You forget, Sylvester," Arnold said sharply. "Without me, these films wouldn't have had the scale they had. My career isn't limited to just one style. I was able to adapt when the world changed." Their voices were growing louder. The studio was filled with noise, and those present on set felt as though they were trapped in an ever-heating atmosphere where every moment could be the last. "You can say whatever you want," Sylvester replied, "but everyone remembers the real heroes. I was the one who showed the world that you could be not just physically strong, but morally unshakable. I left a legacy, and you just want everyone to adore you." Arnold was silent for a moment, as though trying to calm down, but his face was red with anger. "Legacy? Legacy isn't just about being the good guy in movies. It's about having the courage to change and adapt. You were stuck in your Rambo, while I moved forward." At this point, there was no room for moderation, and it seemed their relationship had been irreparably broken. The host, seeing the conflict getting out of control, tried to intervene once more. "I think we've strayed from the topic a bit, guys. Maybe we should calm down and talk about what's important for the future." But this comment only made the situation worse. "The future? The future," Sylvester shouted. "How can we think about the future when the past is still rejecting what we created?" The host was now at a loss for what to do. He saw that this interview could become a real public explosion, and action needed to be taken quickly. Arnold threw out his words with his final breath. "The public has the right to know the truth, but not everyone can understand what was truly important." And in that moment, just as the tension reached its peak, the interview unexpectedly came to an end. But the future was already decided. Their fight, which they had carried in their hearts for years, was now brought to light. And who knew how this would change not only their relationship, but how the world would see them? The tension that had been building between Sylvester and Arnold exploded when they both stood up at the same time, ignoring the host's attempts to stop them. "You don't understand," Sylvester growled, "that you'll never achieve what we achieved. You were always just part of the team, and I was the leader. I'm not talking about your muscles. I'm talking about what I did for the culture of cinema." Arnold couldn't hold back and loudly replied, "Oh, you're saying that without you, I wouldn't have become who I am? What do you think of yourself? I've always been more than just muscles. My career is about my decisions, not the way you paint me." The host grabbed the microphone, trying to calm him down. "Guys, please calm down. This is not the place for these kinds of fights. We're trying to convey to the audience the importance of your contributions." But his words only added fuel to the fire. Sylvester approached the table, fists clenched, and leaned toward Arnold. "You don't understand. You don't understand how hard it was to fight for this place at the top. I gave everything. You just rode the wave of my achievements, and now you're claiming what we built together." Arnold stood still, but his eyes burned with anger. He responded in a tone sharp enough to cut. "You don't know how to look ahead, Sylvester. We lived in different times, and I've long understood that the real hero isn't the one who stays in the past, but the one who moves forward, no matter what." The tense moment was only broken when someone in the audience unexpectedly began whispering in the room. All eyes turned to the person who spoke, and this noise brought the host's attention back to the situation. "Do you hear that?" the host quietly asked, trying to defuse the situation. "Maybe it's just temporary tension, but why not discuss this more calmly? You're two great actors, legends. This shouldn't turn into a personal conflict." However, the tension in the room didn't dissipate, and it was clear even without words that their relationship was irreparably broken. Sylvester and Arnold stood facing each other like two ready-for-battle opponents. Neither wanted to back down. Each felt that this wasn't just a conversation. This was their fight for a place in history. "Maybe it's time to show who the real leader is," Sylvester added, smirking mockingly. "And you know what? No one will forget who carried it all on their shoulders, even if it's hard to admit." Arnold froze in place, but his lips trembled before he spoke. "You won't understand until it's too late. And when everyone realizes who the real leader is, you'll already be in the shadow." The audience, sitting in the hall, could feel the tension growing even more. The silence became heavy, everyone waiting for this moment to break, while Sylvester and Arnold were ready for the last word, the final battle for glory and dominance at the top. Suddenly, Sylvester and Arnold exchanged glances, and a mischievous smile appeared on their faces. They both burst out laughing, and all the tension that had been hanging in the air instantly evaporated. "Are you serious?" Sylvester asked, shifting to a playful tone. "This is all just a show. I thought we agreed on how we'd play this moment." Arnold laughed, giving Sylvester a pat on the shoulder. "Exactly, we even rehearsed before the broadcast. It was all calculated. We're not going to fall out over something silly." The host paused for a moment, but quickly realized that his involvement was part of the big joke and started laughing too. The audience, who had been watching this tense conflict, began applauding, realizing it was all part of the plan. "We're really good friends," Arnold continued, smiling. "We just wanted to give you a show so you'd understand that even legends can have fun like this." "Don't worry," added Sylvester. "We always knew how to diffuse any tension. This was just for effect. Actually, we've been true friends for a long time, and nothing will change that." The host laughed with relief. "Wow, you scared me for a moment. But now it's clear. You're true masters of entertainment. Sorry for my reaction." The audience, still recovering from the emotions, started applauding and laughing, as this turned out to be an unexpected but very positive surprise. Sylvester and Arnold hugged, then turned to the camera. "For everyone who was worried, don't stress. We've been friends for a long time," Sylvester said, laughing. "Performances should be exciting, and we know how to put on a show." "Thanks for being with us," Arnold added. "And remember, true bonds aren't broken by small things." The hall erupted in applause, and everyone realized that this moment had become yet another part of the grand spectacle these two actors had created for their fans. When the laughter subsided and the applause died down, Sylvester and Arnold turned to the host with friendly looks. "It's all good," Arnold said. "We didn't mean to scare you, but sometimes, for a good show, a little drama is needed." "And yes, we always keep our friendship first," added Sylvester. "This is just entertainment for the audience, nothing more. We stopped seriously fighting a long time ago. Instead, we always support each other in every aspect of life." The host raised his eyebrows in surprise and smiled. "Well, this was definitely the best interview I've had in my entire career." thank you so much for the amazing atmosphere." Sylvester and Arnold exchanged smiles, and the hall filled with new applause. They knew this moment would be remembered for a long time, not just by those present, but by millions of viewers worldwide. And although everything that happened was part of the show, it only reaffirmed one thing. True relationships are built on trust, understanding, and the ability to laugh together. When the show ended, Sylvester and Arnold, both a little tired but satisfied, walked toward the exit. They knew they had left a great mark, and that it was moments like these, when everything seemed so real, that could change people's perspectives. "So what do you think, Arnie?" Sylvester asked, smiling. "Maybe next time we'll organize another conflict like this?" "Why not?" Arnold replied with a smile. "But only if you promise not to yell at me next time." They laughed as they walked toward the exit, leaving behind an atmosphere of warmth, trust, and true partnership. And though the interview's conclusion was open-ended for the viewers, one thing was clear. This conflict was really the beginning of yet another wonderful moment in their friendship, which was stronger than any misunderstanding. The only thing left was to return to real life, where they would once again be together, as always, stronger than any challenge. They continued walking towards the exit when the host suddenly asked, "How do you maintain your friendship at such a high level? Do you have any secrets?" Sylvester smiled, stopping for a moment to think. "Well, first of all, we always have mutual respect. Sometimes we can joke with each other, but in reality, the most important thing is honesty. If there are any misunderstandings, we always resolve them right away, without delay." Arnold nodded, adding, "Yes, and it's very important for each of us to support the other during tough times. Not everything goes as we want, but real friends are always there. If there's a problem, we solve it together." "That's true," Sylvester agreed. "That's why there's no room for arguments. We know we can rely on each other, and that's the most important thing." The host smiled and looked at them with admiration. "I can see that there's a very strong bond between you. What about future projects? What can your fans expect?" Arnold looked at Sylvester as if asking for permission to answer. "We're planning a few new shows," he said, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "We want to surprise our audience even more. But of course, it will all be within the spirit of friendship, no tense situations." Sylvester smirked and added, "We're always open to new ideas, and who knows, maybe next time there will be even more fun and surprises. So don't miss it." The host laughed again and raised his eyebrows. "This already sounds like a teaser for something big. I'm sure your fans can't wait." After that, they continued on, and the host added, "One last question. What is important to you in life?" Sylvester and Arnold exchanged glances again, and this time their smiles were calmer, but still sincere. "The most important thing is probably staying true to ourselves," said Sylvester, "and never forgetting that even in the most difficult situations, it's important to support each other. And never miss the chance to laugh," added Arnold, "even when life sometimes puts obstacles in our way." These words were so simple, yet so important. The host smiled, and the audience supported their thoughts with applause. The host looked at Sylvester and Arnold with deep understanding, as if admiring their wisdom. The audience fell silent, waiting for the next words. "Do you have any advice for young actors or athletes just starting their careers?" the host asked, trying to understand how these two achieved such success. Sylvester laughed again, but this time his laughter was calm, soft, as if he was preparing for an important conversation. "My advice is simple. Never be afraid to work harder than others. Success is the result of how much you invest in your work, how much patience you have. And even when it seems like everything is going wrong, you have to keep moving forward." Arnold added, "And don't forget that there are no guaranteed paths. Sometimes you have to take risks. But the most important thing is to keep believing in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, who else will?" The host listened attentively, and the audience looked at them in admiration, realizing that these tips were coming from people who had gone through real challenges. So, if you want to achieve something, Sylvester summed up, don't be afraid of tough moments. On the contrary, each one is another chance to become stronger. Arnold supported him. And remember, success is not just measured by the number of awards or money. It's measured by how much joy you can bring to people, how much positivity you can give to those around you. The audience applauded, feeling how these words touched everyone's heart. Sylvester and Arnold looked at each other again, smiling like old friends who had walked a long way together. Well, said Sylvester, standing up, this was a great interview. Time to reach new heights. And show the world that we can still surprise, added Arnold, raising his hand in a sign of victory. The host looked at them with great respect. Wonderful. I'm really grateful for this interview. You inspire all of us. This definitely won't be the last time we see each other on this show. They smiled, turned around, and walked towards the exit, leaving behind an atmosphere of warmth and mutual understanding. Sylvester and Arnold knew. Today they didn't just give a show, they shared a piece of themselves. And this was the moment that would stay in everyone's memory for a long time. But ahead of them, there was still a lot to come, new projects, new heights, new challenges. And as always, they moved forward together, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.